Hello, friends. My name is Gary Goodhue with the Power of Attunement YouTube channel. I'm an attunement practitioner and teacher. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe, hit the like button, share, leave a comment, turn on your notifications. We've got some really great stuff coming out of this channel. And I want to take this episode to share with you some thoughts around how attunement can move the machinery of the mind. See, I see attunement as a vibrational law. It is a law. There are laws all throughout the universe for how creation works. And attunement teaches this principle that is just so critical to the entire understanding of attunement, and it's called the one law. We're going to go into that much deeper on a future episode because there's a lot involved and it's really important. But for right now, I just want to share the initial basic understanding of the one law, which is radiation and response. So you've probably heard of another universal law called the law of cause and effect. It's at operation everywhere, all throughout the universe. That's why they call it a universal law. And it relates quite closely with radiation and response. The idea being that something happens over here that exerts some causal force, and then there is an effect that happens because of that. In the physical world, in what we know as Newtonian physics, this is often understood as action and reaction. Some action happens here, and that causes a reaction over here. Radiation and response, however, takes this understanding to a deeper level inside the realm of energetics, vibration, and frequency. And what it's saying is that everything in all of creation has an energy and a frequency that's being emitted. And that emitting of frequency is a radiation. And that's true everywhere. We know it all the time. We carry our own frequency and energy body that we are radiating from all the time. And so is everyone else. You know when you're around someone who is happy and uplifted, and they're radiating this positive energy, and it's just infectious. If you start to respond to them and give them your attention, then you're going to feel some of that, and you're going to be uplifted by their positive energy. The same thing happens when someone is in a lower vibrational state, and they're upset or they're angry, and they're actually radiating a negative energy, something that doesn't feel so good. And when we're around that person, if we start to respond to them and give them our attention, then we start to take on some of that energy that they're radiating. So that's the basic idea. Now, the concept is that God, or this higher dimensional reality of creative presence, which we sometimes might refer to as a higher self, or I am, or the wonderful one within. This God presence that is the truth of who we really are is also holding a radiation of energy. And this energy is something that we could call love, unconditional love, like the sun that's always radiating heat and light and warmth, no matter where it is. It could be behind a cloud, or it could be on the other side of the world, and that's what we know as night. But it doesn't matter. The sun is still continuously radiating and pumping out this energy. They say that the sun shines on the just and the wicked all the same, no matter what. And this is God. This is unconditional love, the fact that it's always there. And so if this is true, and we do have a connection within ourselves to this presence of God, then we actually can tune in to that presence through our own inner connection. And the way we tune into it is by giving it our response, by facing towards it, by being in orientation, in directional facing towards it, by looking at it and listening to it. There's a saying that where our attention goes, our energy flows, and that thing grows. It grows inside of our awareness, and it grows inside of our consciousness. And because of that, it ends up growing inside of our experience. All because we gave it our attention. Attention is the beginning part of response. It's also the power of the conscious mind. So we have this mind and this mental realm of our conscious mind, which governs our intellect, our ability to think thoughts, to use logic and reasoning, to figure things out, to form conclusions, to come up with answers and solutions. It's a really important part of who we are. It's one of the four main capacities that we have as human beings. We have a body and a physical nature. We have a mind and a mental nature. We have a heart and an emotional nature. And we have a higher presence of being and a spiritual nature. So many people, however, come to depend or rely on their mind as the ruler of their experience, instead of tuning into the heart and from there connecting to the higher spirit. This might be what's called ego, but regardless of what name we want to give it, it's true that our conscious mind is not meant to try to figure everything out. It's too much. There's too much going on, and we're too limited in our ability. Our ability to see is limited to this little space right here that's in front of me. My ability to have knowledge is limited by the information that I receive. And sometimes I receive information and I think I know something. The reality is that I think that I know. I don't actually know something. I just know that there's some information that I received. However, spirit, which lives in an absolute realm, unlimited, already holds all-knowing. It is the divine mind. It is the all-knowing aspect of God. And when we, figuratively speaking, if God is up here and we're down here, dimensionally speaking, then we have to turn within and turn up and give our response and attention to that source within ourselves. This is a reaching up energy to connect with the energies that are coming down to meet us. And there's a previous episode on the channel here called How to Be a Spiritual Lightning Rod by David Karcher. And it's a wonderful explanation of this process of reaching up and coming down, meeting in the middle, the spiritual fusion. Definitely recommend go and check it out. It's the same thing that I'm talking about here, in essence. Our mind has the ability to open up and receive this download when we are willing to go into our closet, become quiet and still into our own darkness of mind and give our attention upward. Stillness is a key here. It's a very important key. There's so many teachings that talk about the power of stillness. The reason why is because our attention in the busy modern world is very diffused. We're all over the place. We have so many things that are trying to call our attention to us. And yet, We think that being able to multitask and to divide our attention into many different things is a good way to go, but it's not. See, it's diffused. We have to learn how to concentrate our attention. And that's what the term focus is all about. It's like a laser where we take all these different points of light and bring them all together into one concentrated stream. That's a laser, and it can cut through, it can burn, it's powerful. And when we come into stillness, then it's like collecting all of that substance that's been diffused and bringing it to one focal point, and then directing that focal point to the space within ourselves that connects to the highest dimension of who we are. There's a teaching in emissary culture, and it's around the water wheel, using the analogy of the conscious mind. And so if you're familiar at all with a water wheel, it's a wheel, and it's usually positioned in some way so that water is falling on it from above. And it's got all these little slots or buckets. And the water fills up these buckets, and then it gets a little heavier and it moves down. And then a new bucket appears for the water to fill up. And as this process continues with gravity, it turns the wheel because of the continual water being added, increasing its weight. From that turning, that creates the hydroelectric means of generating electricity through the turning of the wheel. And the example is that fresh water that's coming from above is the waters of spirit, the waters of truth. And these waters are constantly, always available. It comes from an absolute realm, like the unconditional love and like the shining of the sun. It's always there, radiating to us and carrying information and energy on these carrier waves of love that are being constantly radiated to us. But we don't receive that unless we open up to respond to it. That's what opens up the channel of reception for attunement to be able to happen. And so when we are in our right orientation and tuned up, we are constantly getting this flow of new thought, new ideas, new inspiration, insight, new understandings that move the machinery of our mind. And in my own personal experience, because I actually practice this quite often, I have a lot of times where I have to present on a topic, and I have very little idea of what I'm going to say. In fact, I practiced this for this video. So what I do is I have a topic or an idea, and I go into a meditation. I sit into a quiet space, and I close my eyes, and I let all of my busyness of thought and feeling come into stillness and coalesce into a single point of awareness. And I'm turning that within, almost like looking into the upper ranges of my brain. And I just sit with it. I sit with the topic. And sooner or later, what happens is things start to show up in my mind. Little ideas with threads of related connectiveness. And as I look at what's showing up, it begins to expand. And there are more thoughts and ideas that come in. And it begins to connect this piece over here to this piece. And I see threads of connection. And it's almost like one of those type of pictures where everything's all fuzzy, but if you just relax your view and come into a certain type of focus, you start to see a picture behind the fuzziness, or words appear, it's kind of like that for me. Things just start showing up in my mind, and I start seeing different perspectives and awarenesses that I wasn't able to see before. Now, as the teaching on the water wheel goes, if we are not coming into a space of giving our response to the highest dimension of who we are, say the angelic reality of being that exists within us, then we haven't opened up the space for that fresh water of truth to come down and turn the water wheel. So when it comes time for us to use our mind, we only have one option, which is to try to crank that wheel ourselves and churn out some of the machinery in order to come up with an idea, a thought, an answer, a solution. And so the teaching goes that we put on this crank, and then we just crank the water wheel to try to stimulate some power to move our own mental machinery and come up with an answer. The problem is the energy that's coming from the water is not the fresh water of spirit and the water of truth. It's now coming out of this cistern that's underneath of the water, the buildup from before. And if we have spent an amount of time of not tuning in and receiving fresh water into our mind, then the water that's left over starts to become stagnant. It starts to become kind of gross. Water does that with no motion over time. And this water that's stagnant represents all of our habitual thinking, all of our patterns, all of our limitations, all of our paradigms and beliefs, usually stuff that's deeper in the subconscious, usually stuff that is no longer serving us, but we still hold on to, because every time we go to turn that crank, we're just recycling that stuff back into the mind. And so it kind of makes sense in a way if you think about why sometimes we tend to approach something the exact same way as we have before, even though we know it doesn't work. It's because we haven't fully went into that space of attunement with the higher dimension of who we are and allowing that energy to move the machinery of our mind so that we can have fresh inspiration and new thought, new idea, new perceptions and perspectives, so that God can move through our thinking capacity. It's said that thy ways are higher than my ways, that thy thoughts are higher than my thoughts. And I can tell you some of my best thoughts have come up not from me trying to think about it and figure something out, but from simply going into that space of stillness, releasing, like putting it up on the altar and releasing it up to something higher, and then just holding space, being still with an sense of expectant listening, knowing that if I'm just still and I hold my focus, something will start to come into my perception, and it will start to move the machinery of my mind, and something beautiful is going to come out of that. Something that I couldn't have figured out on my own by just trying to turn the crank and recycling all my old thoughts back into this present moment, which this present moment's a brand new moment. So it requires brand new thought from the fresh water of the spirit of truth moving through our mind.